Lucky you.
36 best
Tuned
holes in
into
golf.
Alternate Shots podcast,
Barney's Army.
where we talk about golf,
Sandy.
poker,
James Bond.
horse racing,
Double.
classic movies.
Zenyatta.
We have no script,
Down the stretch they
and
come.
we are glad you joined us.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
All right, Billy, it's the greatest week of the year if you're into horse racing, because it's the Derby and it's two dopes doping out the Derby here. So what do you think?
And down the stretch they come. It's always been billed as the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. 50 years ago, Secretariat knocked the socks off the place. It's set a track record. I think it's been tied but never beaten since then. So Secretariat ended up winning the Triple Crown, the first horse to do that. I don't know in how long, but he was just a ridiculous horse. And then Seattle Slew came along and won it after that. But winning the Triple Crown in horse racing is like a golfer winning the Grand Slam in 1 year. It's very difficult because these horses they're only 3 years old, which is young, and they're new 3-year-olds because they run in May. They've never run a mile and a quarter when they hit the Derby, and then the Preakness is a mile and 3/16, and then the Belmont's a mile and a half. And they call the Belmont the test of the champion for that very reason. So you got the Derby, then 2 weeks later is the Preakness. That's quick turnaround for the horses. And then 3 weeks after that is the Belmont, the grueling test, and that's only 3 weeks later. So these horses are running 3 huge races in 5 weeks, right? 2, 4, 7 weeks.
Quick question. So if you look at Secretariat 50 years ago, what was the most important race up into the Derby that he would have run? Would he have run any races in the year that he won the Triple?
Absolutely. They call them prep races. I think Secretariat's lead up was the Wood Memorial at Aqueduct, which is a mile and an eighth, leading into the mile and a quarter race. But for the Derby, there's the Bluegrass, there's the Lexington Stakes, there's all kinds of races a month before, 6 weeks before, 3 weeks before, to prep these horses for this race. And now, because the race has become so popular, the system to get in is you have to run in these races, and you get points for running them, same as like you get FedEx points in a golf tournament. And only the top 20 point gainers are eligible for the field. It's not a perfect system. In fact, I think it's a very imperfect system because it eliminates some possibilities. Say Sir Bart, who won the Triple Crown, had never run that year prior to that. He wouldn't have been eligible for the Derby. So, but that's the way it is. And they'll get 20 horses in the field, which is gigantic.
Yep.
That's probably twice the size of of a big field. And it used to be, now they have a gate that covers all 20. They used to have 2 gates, one next to the other, and the outside posts used to be a disaster, but not so much anymore. In fact, this year's
Why
favorite.
is that? Why 2 gates is harder than 1, or 1 is harder than 2?
Because they were not connected. There was an awkward start for the horses in the supplemental gate. It was like they were aimed a little different or something, but they figured that all out. And the post position has not been, outside post position has not been a detriment in recent years. The 15 hole, which is where Forte this year is, and Forte will be the favorite this year more than likely, has won maybe 2 or 3 times in the last 5 or 6 years from out there, the 15 hole. So it's developed into a very interesting race, and it's a very exciting race. It's never gotten less exciting. And it's usually wide open because of the size of the field, and the trip is so important. So, sometimes you'll get if Forte had drawn, say, down on the rail, that's trouble for him, because by the time 20 horses get to that first turn, if he hasn't gotten out in front in a clear place, he's got a mess to deal with the rest of the way around, weaving in and out or whatever. Last year, a 1,000,000,000 to 1 horse did that, came from nowhere and weaved his way through it in the stretch and ended up winning. Ironically, wouldn't have even been in the race until that day. There was a late scratch, and this horse was on the also eligible, so he scratched in. He was, I forget what he was, 60 to 1, 80 to 1, 50 to 1, something like that. I'd lose money on the replay with this horse.
So you never considered betting on the late sub
No, and again, they call it reading the red board when you go back and say, oh yeah, you read the paper again, you see, I see this, I see that. So that's reading the red board, meaning you're looking at something that's already over. You're reading something that's already been read. So I could go back and look at this horse that won last year, and I still couldn't bet it, couldn't do it. And I didn't bet it going forward and haven't bet him since. And he's a decent horse, but he's no Secretariat, he's no Affirmed, he's no Seattle Slew, he's no Justifier or American Pharaoh. And those are the most recent Triple Crown winners.
Right.
But there was a 36-year gap between Seattle Slew, between Affirmed and I think it was Justified broke the gap 36 years later.
Yeah,
Affirmed won it in 1978, I think.
Yeah.
That was the heyday of horse racing for me. I was relatively new to the sport, and I caught on to Affirmed. I was at Saratoga. I lived up there, and I saw him run. I was at the top of the stretch, and I saw this 2-year-old running. I was like, my heavens, this horse, his legs are going twice as fast as the other horses in the race. He never ran again that I didn't have money on him. He won most of them. He didn't win them all. But poor Alidar, who was second best to Affirmed in all 3 legs of the Triple Crown, he would have won the Triple Crown if there was no Affirmed. Magnificent horse, Alidar. So many great horses over the years. This year is going to be interesting. This horse Forte, who just won the Florida Derby in
Wow.
It
What
was
a
a
race.
really, yeah, unbelievable finish.
Behind 98% of the race.
Yep. He won it like Forgo actually ran 4th in the Secretariat Derby and then went on to have a great career. He was a gelding, so he never went to stud. So he ran till he was 7 or 8 years old. And this horse would come from nowhere and catch everybody at the wire. Willie Shoemaker once said in a race against, I think it was Honest Pleasure, where he catches him in the last trump. Shoemaker says, I don't think I'm going to win. Even when I watch the replay, I don't think I'm going to win. It was that close, you know.
I remember the announcer for Forte said that he said Forte's got a lot of ground to make up with less than a 16th of whatever that is.
Yeah. But like Zenyana in the Breeders' Cup, if she's going to win, she's going to have to do something, you know, it's going to take a miracle. That's that's the best thing about horse racing. There's no elation like winning a horse race. It's ridiculous. You might only win $4, but you pick a horse and you watch it win. Nobody that does that isn't really overjoyed by it. It's inexplicable elation. And especially in a race like this, particularly this Kentucky Derby or anyone like it, with 20 horses in there, if you dope this out and you're right, you're on cloud 9. You might lose 7 races going into that and only win a third of your money back, but you don't care. I mean, you care, but you still want to win that. You still want to win that.
So from a better standpoint, we had that little experiment this week, and I'm like 0 for 4. So yeah. I've already got 4. I've got a box for the Derby, and you talk about. I'm thinking of doing an exacta box: Forte, 2 fills, Tapit Trice, and Kingsbarns. And I'm thinking about boxing that.
Yeah, that 4-horse box for $1 is going to cost you $24.
Right.
So, you know, what I would do is I would do the $1 box for $24 and then take the 2 you like best and box them again. In case they come in, you'll win twice as much. But you might want to, if you like those 4 horses, also box a superfecta, which means if all 4 of them won 1, 2, 3, 4, it's balloons. The horses you name, any superfecta in this race will pay a good amount of money. And
what's a cost for a $1 superfecta when you have 4 horses to box them all?
$24.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So if I put Forte, 2 fills, Tapit Trice, and Kingsbarns in there, pay $24. I've got those 4 horses in any 4 combinations. If they come in, those 4 horses come in that
1, 2, 3, 4, you win.
I win the superfecta.
Right. And especially what you were talking about, if you box them in the exacta and the superfecta, if you hit the superfecta, you're going to hit the exacta. But if you miss the superfecta, you might still hit the exacta because you only need first and second.
So the leverage is the superfecta. And the exacta might get your money back that you invested in the two of these.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if, on the different sites or at the track, it's easy to see what these exactas will pay. You can't tell what a superfecta will pay, but you can see what an exacta will pay. You can't see a triple or a superfecta, but an exacta, they'll tell you the will pays, which change all the way up till post time, but you get a general idea.
So when you're talking, forget about somebody that's just betting on one horse to win. Okay, anybody figure that out, right?
Yep.
I bet on Forte $100 and to win. There's not much creativity in that. But for guys that have been,
But on the other hand, before you go too
Oh.
far, usually that's true, but in this race, Forte might be, in my estimation, good enough to be, even money or 7-5. But because of the size of the field and some of the other horses, you might get 3-1 on this horse. And a true player who likes a horse that should be 7, like a poker hand, should be 7-5, getting 3-1. You might unload on that. Doesn't
Right.
mean you win, but
So there is creativity on that bet. If you look at the way the odds are formulating during the day and how things move up and down.
right.
But what's somebody who's a real handicapper, if you're only thinking about the big race, the Derby, the championship race, what kinds of things, exotics and so forth, go through your head, or your colleagues who've been betting for decades?
Exactas, trifectas, and superfectas. If in racing, there's what's called vertical bets and horizontal bets. A horizontal bet encompasses more than one race: 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th race, 6th and 7th race, 1st and 2nd race, whatever. That's a horizontal bet. And those are daily doubles, pick 3s, pick 4s, pick 5s, pick 6s. A double or any of those that I just mentioned means you have to have the winner of each of those races. So you have to have the winner of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, however many races it is that the pick 6 is, or pick 5, or 5 races for pick 5, etc. The vertical bets are win, play, show, exacta, triple, superfecta, and sometimes a super high 5. A super high 5 is getting the first 5 horses in a row. That's usually, very difficult, pays balloons and costs a lot of money. It would cost you $120 to buy a $1 box for 5 horses. So the heavy hitters will probably lean on exactas because that's 1st and 2nd, especially let's say they love Forte and they're worried about 2 or 3 other horses. So they'll play Forte on top of those 2 or 3 other horses for a good deal of money. There was a guy at Saratoga, I sat next to him. I'm not going to mention his name, who would play superfecta. The guy's got a lot of money. And he's sitting next to me. He hit a superfecta. I said, he got that? He says, yeah. I said, wow, that's going to pay a lot, $1 superfecta. He goes, I got a $20 superfecta. $20 superfecta.
What did the superfecta pay for $1?
650, 750, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was 12,000, 13,000.
Yeah, this guy, a friend of mine who knows him way better, told me this guy hit for like $500,000 one day at the racetrack. So, that's a different world. You're going into a different world. You've already made your fortune. You're probably a horse owner. You're probably intricately involved in the sport on a lot of levels. A lot of guys are. Mike Francesa is part owner of horses. There's all kinds of guys that have, we know Parcells. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So, but it's a great game. It's a little different than golf, where if you're playing $1 Nassau, it's so different than if you're playing even the Wolf game for $5 a point, or
horse racing more like the Wolf
Nassau
game.
5 ways. The pressure kind of goes higher, for people that are not unlimited means, right? We know some people that play cards with that, none of that, unless you went $10,000, $50,000 Nassau, it wouldn't bother them. But in horse racing, the fun, or as you say, the elation, can come at $1, exacta box for whatever, $6.
It's the only sport that is really interactive. The bettor, the fan, is as much a part of the sport as the athletes. There would be no horse racing if there was no betting.
Right.
I think that might be true with football to some degree, but that's not the way people look at football. But everybody bets football games one way or the other. You know, it's part of the enjoyment for the fan to participate. But there is no other way in horse racing. If nobody's betting, there's no purses. There's,
Yeah.
you know, it just doesn't work that way. It would be like having a baseball game where you didn't sell tickets. Nobody's going to Belmont Racetrack for lunch and not putting money in at the window. You're just not going to do that.
It's like playing poker without money.
Yeah,
Nobody's
yeah,
gonna do it.
yeah,
No.
everybody gets their money back at the end. But
Well,
that's the thing. You feel like you're actually part of the team when you win. You're not the jockey, you're not the horse, you're not the trainer, you're not the owner, but you're as happy as all of them on a
we
on a
won.
different level. Yeah,
We won.
won. Yeah,
We won. Yep.
yeah.
Well, the golf is trying to do that, and I have tried a couple of times and come close where you bet on. I had Cam Young in the British Open,
Yeah,
and he busted a drive on the 18th hole at St. Andrews.
yeah.
He was, I think he was one behind Cam Smith, and or maybe two behind, and he needed to make an eagle, and Smith needed to make a par, and then they would have gone into a playoff.
But even in golf, even if you know people, golf is golf, and we all know what happens there. Horse racing, there are times. I'll go back maybe 3 or 4 years. I was at Saratoga, and I was fortunate enough to get to know Shug McGahee, who's a Hall of Fame trainer.
Yep.
And this is a big race. It's the Whitney at Saratoga, and Shug invited me to come over to his stable in the morning to check it out, which is, great to do. And he had a horse, I think his name was Honor Code, or one of those horses, Honor Code horses, and running in the Whitney. And I had looked at the racing form, and I was with a friend, Watson, and I said to Shug, and Shug does not tout his horses. He will not tout him. He doesn't tell you they're good or bad. It's, he's a professional horseman. He's not a gambler. He gets his horses ready. He's a Hall of Fame trainer. And I said to Shug that day, my hat's off to you because you don't duck anybody. He says, what do you mean? I said, the horses you're running against are, 5 or 6 or 7 of the best horses in training in the world right now. And he said to me, I don't give a damn about them other horses the way my horse is now. I was like,
outed his horse.
I folded my racing form up. I said, I don't need to look at this another minute.
A little psychology there.
That horse popped up at the wire to win. It was great. I think he paid $9. It was a great day at the races for me, with inside information that wasn't intended to be information. His honest reaction was, my horse runs his race. You could say that about, John Rahm. If he plays his game, nobody's going to beat him. But that's not always true, because if John Rahm plays his game and Roy McIlroy plays his game and Scheffler plays his game, you don't know what's happening there. But
no, it's
for me, when a guy who doesn't tout his horses,
yeah, the question you asked was really good, or the statement you posed there was psychologically to your advantage, because if you had said to him, is your horse going to win?
No,
he would have spit on you and said, what's your next question? And you'd have gotten nothing out of him, right?
Yeah. He's such a nice man too. I've
Okay.
played golf with him several times, and when he introduced me to his wife, he said, "This is Billy Regan. He knows more about our horses than we do." Because I have a great memory, but it's not true. This guy is the consummate professional on every level. So you can see him interviewed all the time. He's just I got to meet him through a friend of mine who Chris, and then Dennis at Wingfoot. So I played golf with him several times, and it's just a great learning experience to see how that inside, to get to go over to his stables and look at the horses in the stables and watch them working out. That's just a treat.
So you went through that whole process. This is more, we won because you bet on this horse, but you had a lot of information. You knew the trainer. You went over there. You probably put your arms around this horse. You looked in this horse's eyes. You did everything no one's ever allowed to do. Did you have a different elation when you won that one versus some other?
Yeah. No, this was just leading up to it. This was kind of funny because my friend Watson the guy who put me into horse racing in the first place was with me, and he was always a Shug fan long before I ever met Shug. So when I did end up meeting him and getting invited over, I asked if it would be okay to bring Watson. So this was a treat for him too, because he loved this trainer from afar without any personal experience with him, except his knowledge of how good a trainer he was. And when we heard this, so now fast forward to before the race, and Watson saying, "I'm a little worried about it." Bill, stop. Don't worry about anything. This, you're all in or you're not. You can't second guess him at this point. And he was like, "You're right." So but going into that race, I wasn't doing well. So the race before, I went to a ATM, but they were broken down. There was something wrong with the system. I couldn't get money out. So I was like, "Oh my God, I'm down to like $34 and I can't get money." And the Shug's horses in the next race. So I boxed the superfecta for $1, 24 bucks in the previous race before Shug's race, and I hit it. Thank God. And I won like 1,100. So thank you. It's not that I didn't have the money. It's that there was a technical glitch with maybe everybody was hitting the cash machines at the same time or something.
Need that ammo when you get a sure thing like that one.
Yeah, and I'm not a big better. I'll bet $20 on a horse to win, occasionally 40, but I stuck 200 on Shug's horse that day, and I hit the exacta. So that was great. It was a great feeling.
When you look at the Derby, obviously there's 20 horses or more. It's a crowded field, but when you parse through the horses and you get down to your 4, 5, 6 of 20 favorites, what are those differentiators? Is it it's how fast they run,
it's how they run. So if you look at a race with 20 horses, you look at every race, sort of, you have to consider a few things. The track condition. So let's just base this all on a fast track and assume that all these horses can run on a fast track. Now you have to look for who's going to be out in front and what's that going to do? How's that going to affect your choices? If your choice is a horse that runs out in front like King's Barnes is a front runner, who does he have to deal with on the front end? How many does he have to deal with on the front end? There might be 3, 4, 5 other horses that he has to deal with on the front end. Then you have to look at them and look at the fractions of their races. How fast do they run the quarter? 22, is it 23, is it 24 seconds? Will your horse outrun these, or will he have to sit off them? If he has to sit off them, can he kick in at the end, or does he need the lead? There are some horses that need the lead. There's some that, that don't. Some don't want any part of the lead. If you don't want any part of the lead, then you have to work out a good trip, and that's where a jockey is extremely important versus a less experienced jockey, for instance, or a jockey with less nerve, if that's the right word. Some of these guys, might hesitate to try and squeeze through a hole on the rail at the top of the stretch, and some guys don't hesitate. And that's intricate too, because you could have a jockey that's got the courage to squeeze through on the rail, but the horse he's squeezing past might have a jockey on him that doesn't like horses to do that and squeeze them even tighter. So all of that is, gamesmanship, horsemanship, all kinds of things. And you got to stay on the horse. Sometimes the guy will fall off the horse. Yeah. There's so many variables. That's why there's so much elation when you win, because you've beaten all these. They may not have all occurred, but they were all possible. And you've gotten past all that, and you're on your way to the winner's circle.
If you're the trainer of Forte, could you see another come from behind win like Forte showed in the Florida Derby, where he was 98% of the time he wasn't anywhere near the lead in the last?
I figure he'll stay closer, but if he wins, he'll be coming from 6th or 7th place, down the stretch. And his trainer, Todd Pletcher, who's world-class Hall of Fame trainer also, I think has 3 or 4 horses in the race. And Brad Cox, who's another first-class trainer who ended up winning it a couple of years ago by disqualification. Bob Baffert's horse they found was illegally used drugs, and there's all kinds of stories about that and Baffert, but he got banned. So, the horse that actually came in first in the Derby was disqualified 6 or 8 months later.
Oh.
I have a personal problem with that kind of stuff because they say they made it right. The horse that should have won the Derby won the Derby. But for me, I bet the horse that should have won the Derby and lost my money, and then they made him win the Derby. So the bettors got screwed on that. And the bettors almost always get screwed on that kind of stuff because the bets are gone.
All right,
Just-
so let's
just not
get
right.
down to the race. Let's get down to the race. I want you to tell us what you think's going to happen, and we'll kind of conclude this doping out the Derby. You're going to go.
All right.
You're going to
I'm
go.
gonna, I'm gonna go over to my racing form here.
Yeah. I
I'm
already
gonna-
told you I'm looking at Forte, the two Phils, Tappet Trice, and Kingsbarns. I might throw a fifth horse in there and do a $40 box. We'll see.
All right, I'm gonna take you from the rail out. Hit show. Well, because he's on the rail, he's got some speed. He doesn't always make the lead, but he might have to try and make the lead. He's got Manny Franco on him, 27% winning jockey. He's lost to 3 of the horses in this race in the past. He'll be a long shot. I'm writing him off. If he goes for the lead, I don't think he can last, and I don't even think he'll get the lead. The horse right outside of him, Verifying, same trainer, Brad Cox. Great jockey, Tyler Gaffleone, who's very, very good jockey, top 5 or 10 in the world, in my opinion. Has some experience at 1 1/8. He lost by a neck to Tappet Trice. Has some speed. I expect him to go right for the lead. I think he'll be at least one of the few horses that go right for the lead. But Tappet Trice has beaten him. Confidence Game has beaten him. Reincarnation has beaten him, and Forte have beaten him in other races. So I don't know if he lasts. The thing to remember about the Derby, these horses are getting better and better as they age. Some of them, haven't peaked yet and might not peak until next year. So you don't know. The next horse, your horse, Two Phils. Trainer is very good. Larry Velli is training at a 31% win percentage this year. And the jockey is riding at a 16% win percentage over the year. But when he rides for this trainer, he wins 23% of the time. That's out of 158 races. This horse will sit. He'll probably find some good spot. I don't know if he'll tuck in behind the one, but he's got some speed, so he'll be present. And I think he's going to be a crowd favorite for a number of reasons. So he's a 12-1 morning line. He might go off less than that. You just don't know. Then you come to Confidence Game, who has a similar running style to to the rail horse. I'm throwing him right out. His trainer's decent. His jockey's very good. His jockey's name is Jimmy Graham, by the way. not the same Jimmy. But he's legit. But he's beaten Reincarnate. He's lost to Two Phils. He's lost to Rocket Can, and he's lost to Jace's Road. So he's got too much to do. Now you come to Tappet Trice. Luis Saez, terrific rider, top 3 or 4 in the world, certainly in the United States, with a 36% win percentage at Churchill this year, 20% over the year, and 20% for Todd Pletcher, who's got a 50% win percentage right now, but that's out of 2 races, but 21% over the year. Todd Pletcher's top 5 trainers in the country for sure. And this horse is proven at 1 1/8, at 1 1/16, and a mile. He's actually won his last 4 or 5 races. He's only lost once. He came in 3rd in his very first race. He's the legitimate shot here, and he'll ride. He can stay close or come from behind. So he's dangerous. He's very dangerous. Leave him out at your own risk. Here's Kingsbarns next. He's your favorite, your horse. He's won 3 for 3. Not against great company, although he's beaten a couple of these horses, Disarm and Jace's Road. That was in the Louisiana Derby. Before that, he was in an optional claimer, 75. That means that's a lower class race than a stakes race or an allowance race. It doesn't mean that the horses all stink. It just means early on in their career, they might not know how good he was, so they put him in. I doubt they risked him for a claiming price, but we don't need to get into that. But he goes on the lead. He's gonna be fighting for that lead, and he's outside those other speed balls inside him. So he's got a better shot at controlling speed. He doesn't necessarily have to get to the lead before the first turn, but he can sit there and then maybe as they get to the back stretch, start wrestling with the front runners. He's also trained by Todd Pletcher, who's got a big handful here. Then we come to Reincarnate. I'm tossing him right out. He's fast, but I think he'll fall apart.
Okay.
If you guys are listening to this, I would run to the windows and bet Reincarnate after I just said that. So he's got a great jockey. John Velasquez is a Hall of Fame. He's been around for a long time. You can't fault the jockey. But he's a front runner, and he might have some difficulty with the horse inside him, King's Barnes, and the cheap speed on the rail. So we call it cheap speed because I don't think it's going to last long. Then you come to Mage, if you say that correctly.
Yeah, that's it.
He's going to sit off the pace a little bit. He's got Javier Castellano riding him, a very good Hall of Fame jockey. He's been around for a long time. I don't give him much chance. He's already lost
Mage
to
is the
Forte
one that
twice.
was ahead, and then Forte came from behind to beat Mage in the Florida Derby.
Yeah, and came from behind to beat him in the Fountain of Youth, also the race before that, where Mage ran fourth. So he's a good horse. He's going to have a good career, but he's not going to win this race. Then we come to Skinner. Skinner's not going to be near the front, so he's going to have to work out a trip. He's got JJ Hernandez, who's a good jockey, 24% winner, has never ridden for this particular trainer. John Sheriff's, very good trainer. In fact, trained Zenyatta. So
there's talk
he
about
knows.
Skinner, though. There's a lot of talk on. I've seen Skinner getting a little noise. Maybe it's because of the jockey, maybe because of the trainer. We'll see.
Well, and the race might set up for him because, you know, if too many horses go for the lead, what that tends to do is then they start stepping on the gas, and you reach a certain point where you're going too fast. Like any race, if you blow yourself out early, you're going to be, you know, heaving and hawing in the stretch. So if the race falls apart, as they say on the front end, Skinner could come from behind. He has made some good runs from behind. He's only got one win in 6 races. It was his maiden race, so he's lost a Practical Move twice in a row. I don't give him much of a chance, but I don't throw him completely out. Practical Move to me is a very interesting
move.
one.
I like this one.
Yeah, he's very interesting because his first 4 races were the first 2 races were 6.5 furlongs, so they're going twice as far in this. They're going 10 furlongs in this race, so it's not quite twice as far, but it makes a difference. And he was second and third in those first 2 races. Then they stretched him to a mile. That was his best race, his third race, where he finished second. Then they stuck him back at 7 furlongs, less than a mile. He backed up to third. Then this is what's important to me. His next race, they switched jockeys and they moved him to 2 turns, a mile and a 16th, and he won. He drew away. So they kept him at a mile and a 16th with the same new jockey in his next race, and he ran clear again. So I'm putting Practical Move in there. Disarm, I'm throwing out. He's speed that's going to get outrun. Same with Jace's Road. Then we come to Sun Thunder. I don't think he's been beaten by all these horses a number of times. Angel of Empire is Brad Cox's best shot, the 14, and then Forte, who I think can't lose unless he runs into a real bad trip. He comes from behind. I would go with Forte, Practical Move, shot with this Derma Sotogake, the Japanese horse, who's very good on the front end.
Going to ever win a Kentucky Derby?
Who's that?
Is a Japanese horse going to win
Nope.
it?
Nope. He's a Japanese horse has never won a Derby, but they're getting better all the time. There's so many people betting this race. So I'll tell you a trick that Watson told me. You watch the morning line. If a horse that's like 8-1 goes to 4-1 and then stays there, that's a good horse to keep your eye on because you know this isn't just one guy betting because there's going to be tons of money bet on this race. So
all right, we're going to let all these amateurs figure it out. You gave them enough of these inside tips, Billy. Great job. This is our effort of 2 dopes doping out the best horse race, right? The best horse race of the year.
Yeah, it's the Masters. So is the Masters the best?
It is
tournament, or is the British Open?
There it is. It's the Masters.
Yeah, this is the Masters.
The Belmont's pretty good too.
Yep, the Belmont's the British Open. The Preakness is the U.S. Open.
All right, happy horse racing. Thanks for joining us today.
Billy Harmon.
We really appreciate your
Double
feedback.
Indemnity.
And please
Arky.
Subscribe to the show and hit the bell icon so you get notified.
Movie Classics.
New episodes.
Mark Gable.
Hit them hard and hit them off.
Best 36 holes.